Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a bi-weekly program on KSQD 90.7 FM. I'm your host for today, Mathilde Rand. My guests are Dr. Michelle Merrill and Roland Saher. Our conversation will be about the convergence of despair and hope around climate change. Dr. Michelle Merrill started Novasutras in 2017 as a way to respond to the need for spiritual community centered on the biggest challenge humanity currently faces: how to reawaken our deepest connection with our living world, to reclaim our joy, honor our pain, grow trusted relationships, and take meaningful action in service to all life. Roland Saher is a retired high school social studies teacher and an activist. He believes that we must look both at how bad the trouble is we are in and the fact that there is hope as long as there are people. He also tries to enjoy the struggle as much as he can. Welcome, Michelle and Roland.
Thank you.
Michelle, could you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what led you to do this work?
Sure. I had started out being really interested in wildlife and actually got to do research in the rainforests of Central Africa and Southeast Asia. While I was there, I was seeing so much devastation and how the people of those parts of the world are affected by choices being made on other continents, especially in the US and Europe. So when I came back, I began teaching anthropology at Cabrillo College, and I was also trying to teach sustainability courses and help students who are interested in these questions around sustainability, and spent more and more time studying what was going on with climate as well. Since then, I've not only started Novasutras, but been doing a lot of activism, been arrested twice in civil disobedience actions around the climate. Also doing work with a group called the Resilient Activist, really looking at how the emotional challenges that activists face in trying to address these issues.
And Roland, could you talk a little bit about what led you to join the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network?
In about 2007, I was invited to a lecture by a climatologist at UCSC, and she was part of the scientist panel that Governor Schwarzenegger had put in place to figure out what would be the effects of global climate change on California. And what she presented alarmed me. From then on, I made it my business to tell my students about climate change and what the scientists were predicting. And since then, the predictions have all come true. And unfortunately, we have to say that it looks worse than they anticipated then. And so when I retired, I joined Santa Cruz Climate Action Network, and my partner in crime, so to speak, Pauline Seals, and I, she's also a retired teacher. We have gone to lots of schools in the county, again, teaching about climate change. And so I'm still very concerned with what climate change does. And today, we're going to talk about the psychological effects of it.
Exactly. Michelle, in a 2019 interview to the Good Times Santa Cruz, there was a quote, and I'm not sure if it's yours, but it's a very important quote. It said, "Ecological grief is very present right now because we are very aware of the facts of climate change. People are realizing that's an existential threat and that there is a possibility of human extinction." Do you agree with that statement? And if so, can you elaborate on that?
I think when it comes to climate grief, absolutely, that is even more present now. In 2019, we were already seeing so many wildfires all around the world, breathing the smoke from fires all around California. Then we had the CZU fires of 2020 here. And just in the last few weeks, we've had this massive flooding in Pakistan. There's been ongoing famines in Madagascar and now in the Horn of Africa as well. The typhoons hitting Philippines and Japan just in the last few days. And then we've got the hurricane season in the Atlantic as well. People are really feeling it. Now, the possibility of human extinction, I'd say that's a very small possibility. Humans are very adaptable, but certainly the possibility of tremendous disruptions in how civilization currently operates. It's something that we have to think about because these effects are happening now all around the world, and there's every likelihood that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I would agree. And short of human extinction, there is already tremendous human suffering, and not just human, but the animal world, the plant world. The whole planet is affected by this. And even if one doesn't sit in a drought, if one doesn't sit in a typhoon, one hears about it. And a lot of people now are complaining, rightfully so, about the inflation of food prices. And part of that, I think, is already due to climate change. Because as temperatures rise, the plants just don't produce as much as they used to in what we now think of as normal times.
And certain crops, I understand, cannot grow in the areas where they are regularly grown.
Yes. Yes, plants, they can adapt, but only so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the disruptions from both drought and flood that we're getting these extremes, and it's really disrupting the amount of rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
And crops depend on that all around the world.
And then recently, I learned watching TV or reading the paper, all of a sudden there is this big rainfall. And right at the moment when either the fruit or the crops are either to be harvested or blooming, it creates anxiety.
Yes.
And so we could then establish that client anxiety is a real thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, there was a survey earlier this year called the American Climate Perspective Survey that found that about 1 in 4 respondents in America, so not people experiencing these other even larger tragedies all around the world, but 1 in 4 in America reported being very anxious, very fearful, and or very angry about climate change.
And this is probably not true for everybody at the same rate. Young people, I would assume, look towards the future and they say, oh my goodness, what's going to happen if this becomes the new normal? And there are some people who disagree with using that term. It's not normal. This is weird. And so they see their future threatened. And of course, those people who are exposed more directly to the ravages of climate change, they feel more anxiety, panic, rage, fear, depression, whatever it is, than those who have the luxury of distancing themselves from this. But I think that even those people who don't even acknowledge that there is climate change experience some form of unease.
Unease if you're a climate change denier?
Yes.
That is fascinating.
I pose that as a hypothesis. Nobody can escape this.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, here in Santa Cruz, I feel rather safe. I mean, I live close to the ocean, so after the tsunami we had a couple of years ago, I'm very aware of it. I'm just above that. But I can imagine if the ocean continues to rise, I better move. Unless I live on a houseboat, which I don't.
You and so many other millions of people have the same concerns, yes.
I know the library did a exhibit about the rise of the ocean and how it would affect people in Santa Cruz. That was a fascinating exhibit.
Yeah, people can go to an interactive website where they can look at how sea level rise would affect Santa Cruz at different levels of temperature increase. So you can move the controls and see how far the sea level rise would reach into Santa Cruz. This is several decades away, but just thinking about it makes you feel a little bit uneasy. Now would be the time to act.
Having the sense of unease or despair or panic, right now we're acknowledging it.
Yes.
It makes me feel a little bit better. Not that I think nothing is going to happen, but I don't feel alone. Yeah. You're here. You're talking about it. The listeners are feeling it. I mean, I talk to people in Europe. I talk to people in other parts of the United States. We need to talk about it. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are organizations all around the world As I mentioned, I'm another organization I'm affiliated with, the Resilient Activist, hosting these things called climate cafes. And it's just a chance to come together for people who are aware of what's going on and talk about what they're feeling, but most importantly, to just look around and see reflected that everyone gets it. Because if you're just walking down the street, if you're hanging out with friends, thinking or talking about what's going on with the climate, and then seeing people going on as if there's nothing to worry about, it's painful. It's like you're being gaslit, right? You're being told that you're crazy for being so worried about it, when in fact what's crazy is that more people are not paying attention and just going on as if it's going to all be okay.
It's hard for human beings to acknowledge a threat that seems to be far away in the future or geographically far away from, particularly us here in Santa Cruz, to deal with it. It's difficult for us.
So it's widespread.
Yeah.
Yes.
A study from a couple of years ago found that 65% of young people were saying they were very worried or extremely worried about their future because of climate change. And about 45% of them said this affected them every day, that they had some kind of experience with this. And they need to know that there's nothing wrong with them having that anxiety, that that's legitimate, and that other people experience it too.
And even the fact that they may be angry with us, older people, that we didn't fix the problem.
Yeah.
And I remember in the 60s, when I was their age, I was angry. Why aren't our elders doing anything?
Yeah.
Which, of course, wasn't true because a lot of people were doing things. But am I right that more people around the world are aware, are coming together? You're talking about many organizations.
Yeah.
People can go to the website, your website, novasutras.org.
Yes.
They can go to the Resilient.
The resilientactivist.org is another one. Santa Cruz Climate Action Network.
Yeah.
And I think it's just very healthy to start talking, if people haven't talked about climate change, to start having conversations about climate change. For the one reason, to see that one is not alone with these sentiments, and it's also helpful for people to grapple with this. And we do need to wrestle with this. This is so huge. It takes a lot of wrestling.
Well, I want to remind listeners that they are tuned in to KSQD Santa Cruz. My name is Mathilde Rand, your host for today, and my guests are Dr. Merrill and Roland Saher. And let's return to the conversation about despair and hope, because hope is part of it, in coping with climate change, in particular on how to deal with our despair. So, Roland, what does it take, or what approach can we take in dealing with climate anxiety?
Number one, acknowledging that it's there. Number two, we use this term here, climate anxiety, but actually that can mean a whole bunch of different things. It's not a scientific term that we're using here. People may feel panicked. People may feel angry. People may feel depressed or grieving. Anytime you hear about another glacier disappearing, you may feel some grief. And all that is very legitimate. It's healthy. And that's another thing that people should know. It's perfectly normal. It's healthy to feel feelings. And they need to be addressed.
And we shouldn't keep it to ourselves then.
Right.
So if I connect like I'm doing today with you, if I connect with you, I may get inspired to either change something in me or change something in what we do and approach people. But let's talk about it a little bit more. Because the other thing you mentioned to me when we spoke is that we're not dead yet. And
right.
If we appreciate the beauty and the goodness of that, what we still have, that's basically the basis for us to feel better and to do something. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was part of a study that the Resilient Activist was conducting, again, just earlier this year, showing that practices like mindfulness, nature reconnection, in Novasutras we offer a practice called Shinrin-yoku, or forest immersion, that these help us get the emotional resilience we need to be more effective. But the other piece of it, of course, is being effective is a really powerful way to cope with these emotions, to do something about it. It might be a small personal action. It might just be planting a garden or doing a beach cleanup with some friends, or it might be taking to the streets with a megaphone. But just feeling those feelings, you need a way to work through them, and the best way to work through them and the way that's going to help heal them is to do something that feels effective in making a change, because every little bit makes a difference. Every little bit reduces future suffering.
Right.
So, yes, things might continue to get worse, but how much worse is still up to us.
And the other thing that I usually do when I feel this way, I go to the national parks.
Oh, yeah.
I get so much inspiration. I know that it's at a younger age I did some backpacking. I mean, being completely away from the civilized world and being out there struggling along on the top of these mountains and along the rivers, something happens to you. And then after 5 days, you have a hard time getting back with the noises of the cars and the distances and all that. I mean, it's so immediate when you're there. Is that something you do in your practice?
Yeah, in fact, the Shinrin-yoku practice that I talked about, often we go to Henry Cowell or we go to Quail Hollow. Spending time in the woods amongst trees, even if it's just an hour or two, is incredibly nourishing. Again, I'm a scientist by long years of training, and there's so much research that supports actual physical health benefits. Not from the exercise. Doing the same amount of exercise walking around in the city or at the gym, not going to do it. It's about being in a natural setting. It's about being amongst trees, in fresh air. Metabolism improves, your mood improves, and that's a lasting effect. You do that on the weekend, you're better through your whole week.
I saw in the material that is on your website, which is a very interesting website with lots of ideas and lots of different ways for people to deal with their own anxiety and to recoup their energy to actually become activists. And in a moment, Roland, I'm going to ask you more about that. There was this quote in relation to sacred activism, which really, I mean, it's an old quote. Rainer Maria Rilke, a German poet, he's long gone.
Yeah.
But what a truth he spoke. And the quote was, "If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees." Isn't it something?
Yeah.
I mean, I can just see myself.
Yeah. Part of my practice is I lead guided meditations, and often I specifically work with that quote and that symbolism of feeling yourself being like the trees, and also feeling, and I think it's the literal truth, recognizing that the trees are our allies and they are going to help us as much as they can. I was fortunate enough to be able to go into Big Basin. For those who don't know, it's open again, but by reservation, and to see the trees recovering from that devastating fire. The intensity of the fire and the devastation is very present still. But the recovery, the capacity to heal that is present in nature, particularly in redwoods, it soothes the soul. It's just amazing.
And I understand there's citizen scientists in that area that actually documents what's happening.
Yeah.
And they document what you just said, how it is regrowing. So if I'm rooted and I feel like a tree, I feel strong to do some activism. So tell us, Roland, what kind of activism is it that you do, and what makes you feel better?
I like having what I call climate conversations. I mentioned that earlier. And scientists have found out that just the act of talking with another person about climate makes a big difference, particularly somebody who feels that they can trust us. And if we establish a connection, this is not about hitting somebody over the head with the facts and forcing them to admit that they're wrong and I'm right. That's not what it's about. It's about building connection again. and then sharing our values, what's important to us. And quickly one can discover similarities, and that's from where we need to start. And I think that's the roots. We all share the same roots. And so talking about climate is a big thing of what we all need to do. And then it goes all the way to what Michelle mentioned, civil disobedience. There are lots of ways in between. We could start making it a habit to always think about, is this or is that sustainable? My diet, how do I get around? How do I live? My surroundings, is it sustainable? Mm-hmm. And that's a new way of looking that we had the luxury not to have to look at. But nowadays, I think we should. Then there's all this political activities, signing letters and calling our Congress
and
people.
Sitting in the halls of Congress and you name it.
Right. But it starts from just looking at, acknowledging, connecting with people over climate change, having climate conversations, and then learning about it. That's really important.
Yeah, and those conversations where you are able to feel your feelings, that gives you the space, that gives you the capacity, even to open yourself up to learning more, to really looking at the problem and saying, okay, what are the solutions that are important? What can I do right now? What feels right to me? And it's okay to take baby steps. You don't have to go chain yourself to something right away. I'd save that for later. It's more fun. But just some basic things. If it's a sunny day, can you hang your laundry out on the line instead of running in the dryer? Ooh.
I want to get back to what you said earlier, the amazing ability of nature to heal. We have that too, us human beings.
We're part of nature.
Absolutely.
Yes, we are. And we heal our feelings when we see that somebody is laughing, when somebody is crying, when somebody is trembling with fear, when somebody is raging, when somebody is talking in an animated way. Those are all outwardly visible signs of an internal healing process happening. And after that, then we'll be able to
do the action.
Do the studying.
And as far as I understand from you, you do the action and then you repeat and you repeat and you repeat and you never, ever give up.
Yeah, the whole process needs to be repeated. The acknowledging, the grieving, the action, and the repeat.
So listeners, you can contact Dr. Michelle Merrill at the website novasutras.org, as we mentioned before. You can also reach her at Novasutras, on social media. And Roland can be reached at Roland Saher, Roland, ROLAND SAHER, Roland Saher, at gmail.com. Now we have a few more moments for some final thoughts. Why don't you start, Michelle?
Again, the important thing, as I see it, is that there is a community that wants to invite you in. So whatever level you're at with this, if it's just that you're starting to feel stressed out and you need somebody to talk to about it, or you're looking to step up in your activism, find community to help you through it.
And I want to address in particularly all those of us who were raised male, because we were raised in many instances not to deal with our feelings, not to acknowledging them, and certainly not to share them with others. Dudes, it's cool to have feelings. Our life may very well depend on it.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle Merrill of Novasutras and Roland Saher of the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network. And we just learned about how they can contact you. Thank you both so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.